In November 1930, a seasoned Canadian trapper named Joe Labelle made his way through the remote snow-covered wilderness of the Nunavut region in northern Canada. He was seeking shelter in an Inuit village along the shores of Lake Anjikuni, a village he had visited many times before. But what Joe found when he arrived didn't make sense. The village was completely empty, not a single soul in sight. And what he discovered next would turn this into one of the greatest unsolved disappearances in Canadian history. Joe Labelle was a seasoned explorer of the Northern Territories. He had spent years living off the land, trapping and trading with the Inuit people. He knew the signs of an active village: the smell of cooking fires, the sound of sled dogs barking, the chatter of people going about their daily routines. But as Joe approached the village on that freezing November afternoon, he was struck by an unsettling silence. He could see the glow of fires flickering through the cracks of the wooden huts. But there were no people. The sled dogs, usually noisy and active, were motionless. Joe stepped closer, his breath visible in the frigid air. The dogs were dead, still tied to their posts. They hadn't frozen from the cold, they had starved. Joe knocked on the door. No answer. He pushed it open and stepped inside. What he saw chilled him to the bone. Clothing was neatly folded. Rifles were stacked along the wall. Food supplies were untouched. Even a pot of stew was sitting over the fire, still warm. It was as if the villagers had simply stood up and left in the middle of a meal. Joe searched every hut in the village. Same thing. No signs of struggle, no blood. Just emptiness. Outside, the snow was pristine. No footprints leading away from the village, no signs of a hurried escape. It was as if the earth had swallowed the entire village whole. Joe was unnerved, but determined to figure out what had happened. He made his way toward the village's small graveyard, located at the edge of the settlement. What he found there made no sense. The graves had been dug up. The earth was disturbed, but not by animals or natural weathering. The graves were opened deliberately, and the bodies? Gone? Why would anyone exhume their own dead? And why would they leave the village immediately afterward? Joe had no answers, but the scene was too unsettling to stay any longer. He left the village and immediately contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. When the RCMP arrived days later, they were just as baffled. There were no signs of violence. The villagers' belongings, rifles, food, clothing, were all untouched. There was no sign of a mass exodus. No footprints, no sled tracks, no trail. It was as if the entire population had been plucked from the village without warning. And then there was the blue light. A nearby trapper reported seeing a strange blue glow in the sky over the village on the night of the disappearance. He described it as a pulsing light that hovered over the village before disappearing into the sky. The Inuit people had legends about spirits and skylights, warnings about unnatural forces that could lead people into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Could the blue light have been some kind of natural phenomenon, or something else entirely? The RCMP couldn't explain it, but the villagers were gone, and they have never been seen again. So what really happened to the Anjikuni villagers? The blue light and the sudden nature of the disappearance have fueled theories of alien abduction. The idea that a spacecraft may have been involved would explain the lack of tracks or struggle. Others have suggested a rapid environmental event, perhaps a sudden ice shift, an underground gas leak, or a magnetic disturbance. But that wouldn't explain why the bodies were missing or why the graves were disturbed. Inuit legends tell of spirits, the Tornrasuk, that can lure people away from their homes into the wilderness. Could the entire village have been influenced by something beyond our understanding? There's also the theory of an attack by hostile tribes or predators. But there were no signs of violence or theft. And what about the sled dogs? Why would they be left tied up to die? None of the explanations make sense. The RCMP eventually closed the case, listing the village as abandoned under unexplained circumstances. No human remains were ever recovered. The villagers were never seen or heard from again. Joe Labelle continued his life as a trapper, but he never went back to Lake Anjikuni. He would later say that whatever happened in that village, it wasn't natural. And the blue light? That was never seen again. To this day, the Anjikuni Village disappearance remains one of the most chilling and unexplained vanishings in Canadian history. Because when an entire village, men, women, children, disappears overnight with no trace left behind, you have to ask yourself, what really happened? If you like this story, make sure to subscribe for more true mysteries and disappearances. Until next time, stay safe.